Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, first of all, to Katie Dow for introducing social perception or sort of contextualizing social perception well. What I will do is to try to address social perception more in a risk assessment context. So that will be my focus today. And the results I will present to you will be based on research and results from a EU project that we call Romanco, of which we have several other partners here today. You will show the list at the end. But that's my task for today. So to start out, let me see now. Can I use this one? Yeah. There are some key questions, I think, when you address social perception of anything, really. But for CCS, the critical risks for CCS, I will get back to those in just a few seconds. But there are some other questions also. For instance, how safe is safe? We always talk about how safe is CCS, but what do we actually mean by addressing that question? And how do we actually perceive risk? And how do we communicate risk? Which is another important question. So as I said, we are looking at this in the Romanco project. And the questions we ask ourselves then is which information is most relevant and most needed to address this question? And what are the most important mechanisms to address public concerns when you are to say make a decision on investing in a project, for instance. Well, critical risks for societal embeddedness of carbon capture and storage, what I would call the factual risks, would imply things like harmful leakage and contamination of water, groundwater, as a result of carbon capture and storage. Could be induced seismicity and harm to people and society. Could be accidents at CCS infrastructure. And of course, it could be financial risk for those who are investing in these kind of projects. And it's all about what Katie referred to as the socio-technical system. We are used to having numerous socio-technical systems around us all the time. The fossil energy business is a socio-technical system which is mature in all respects. It can stand an accident. It can stand a severe financial loss. It will not disrupt our belief in the system as a system. For carbon capture and storage, it's quite the opposite. It's a very immature system, and very small things can actually disrupt the whole system, which makes it so important actually to also address the societal aspects. So then how do we address public concerns? And Katie, she spoke about a lot of things that relates to research sort of in general, but it's about understanding what are the key public concerns and to interpret the most important societal drivers, as well as implementing the societal concerns in risk assessment strategies and decision making. And the last thing here is really important because this is a methodology that I will come back to, which is not sufficiently developed to actually address such transformative changes as we are talking about when it comes to the green transition, CCS, and many other things. And the way we do this in the Romanco project is by questionnaires, is by dialogue, is by involving society in discussions, and by performing comparative studies. First, to address how safe is safe. Well, when it comes to CCS and the whole CCS value chain, there is limited public technical knowledge about CO2 risk. I think we should, I think we can say that. And the public recognition on CCS doesn't really differentiate between what is low and high rates of CO2 leakage. CO2 leakage is synonymous with high risk. That's the common perception. The facts, though, on the other side, is that CO2 is part of the atmosphere, 0.04%, and slow seepage occur naturally in many places. And look at this map of Italy and all the natural CO2 seepages that we have. These have been there forever, as long as people have been living in Italy. And nobody thinks of them as severe risks by any means. However, CO2 can be poisonous, but then you need to have concentrations of more than 5%, which is 100 times the concentration in a normal atmosphere. And we have examples like in Lake Nyos in Africa, where this happened in the limnic seafloor that suddenly erupted with a large bubble of CO2 that killed animals along the shore. But the CO2 leakage perception, I would say, is largely overemphasized. Number one, there is a perception that there is an easy way out for CO2. So in the public debate, you are very often faced with the fact that it's leakage or no leakage, 1, 0. This is not what's reality. And I'd say also the second thing, that the word leakage is used uncritically for escape of CO2 from the reservoir. So leakage means escape from reservoir to surface. That's, again, 1, 0. The facts are that a CO2 storage system would have many barriers in place between the actual CO2 store and surface, be it sea floor or ground surface. So there will be plenty of barriers, like in the wells we drill, they have a multiple barrier system. So if you pass barrier 1, which you shouldn't, of course, then there's a second barrier kicking in, and a third barrier, and a fourth barrier. And the same with a reservoir. You have one cap rock, and you have a second cap rock, and a third cap rock. So there are numerous barriers also in the reservoir. So actually, there is no leak, sort of safe to no safe. It's a gradual transformation where the CO2 is handled in a CO2 store by these numerous barriers. And this is not communicated really in the public debate. So if we look at then this from a communication perspective, there is a big challenge in how we communicate the risk of CO2 storage. First, the high probability of containment. And this, I need to say, from an industrial point of view, CO2 is no different from hydrocarbon production. We've done this for 100 years, and we know how to deal with the subsurface in terms of creating barriers and preventing things to come out. And secondly, it's also very under-communicated that small leakage rates is the most likely scenario. So the combination of high probability of containment and low risk of small leakage rate means, in fact, that CO2 storage is both safe and beneficial, including at small leakage rates. But that is not the common public perception, I'm afraid. So in the Romonco project, in order to address this, and to be able to understand, identify, and manage risks to societal embeddedness of CCS, we have developed, or we are trying to develop, a methodology where we try to address societal risk or societal perception risk in a risk governance framework. And we do this by applying a set of different methodology in social sciences. We use what we call the societal embeddedness level methodology to actually address and try to semi-quantify the risk. We do this by performing comparative studies in several countries. And we do this by also then transforming the results that we have from this societal embeddedness level methodology into a risk management methodology. And in this case, we collaborate with a company called RiskTech, who has developed a bow tie methodology to actually to analyze risk. So I'll get back to that in a second. So then in the Romanco project, which is a collaborative project between Norway, the Netherlands, Germany, Romania, and Greece, we are assessing risk along the whole chain. And we have used the methodology, as I just referred to, surveys, interviews, etc. And this is a comparative studies between all 5 countries. And what we do is to perform a 360 degrees risk assessment, asking anybody from scientists to operators to policymakers, public, regulators, etc., to be involved in this process. And the question we want to ask and get answers to is, what are the most relevant risks that you see in the CCS chain? And this was more or less the last question that Katie had in her session. So quantification of risk perception, there are ways to do this, but we do this, number one, by looking at risk in a probability consequence matrix. And you are familiar with these kind of schemes. When it comes to CCS, there is a starting point here, which is not good for CCS, which is that the perception of risk is in the upper right corner in this matrix, whereas the factual risk should be in the lower left corner. So the question is, how do we move the perception from the upper right to the lower left? So to answer this, we have hubs. We are looking at different types of hazard, from the geological system, the technology system, society, and we're looking at credibility and risk perception of each of these, and try to then put this into this bow tie method. And this is a method that addresses these various forms of risk: geological system, technical system, society, and what are the key and the main threat, and what are the top event of all these risks, and how do you mitigate such an event? That's the way you would normally use this bow tie scheme. So that kind of brings me to the final part of this, which I'm going to give you some examples of the stakeholder questionnaire and the answers that we had from the Norwegian study. I had hoped that I could bring you some more results from the comparative studies, but I can't, because we haven't come that far yet. So about the Norwegian part, we see there are great variability in the perception of knowledge level between the public. Generally, we can see that the perceived knowledge about CCS is very much coupled to gender and age. And not surprisingly, men over 60 think they know a whole lot more than women under 30. Surprised? No. Concerns about CCS, what we see is there's a growing concern from storage to transport, from capture to storage to transport, as we move in that direction. So people are less concerned about the capture part and more concerned about the storage part. And a little bit surprisingly is that they are more concerned about offshore storage than about onshore storage. And this is remember the Norwegian study, because we don't have any onshore storage. So it's easy to be more concerned about the offshore. And then we had some questions that we posted a lot of statements, specific concerns and statements, and we asked, what do you think about this? And again, this was a questionnaire ranging from 1 to 5. And we see, surprisingly, if you look at the upper red circle, people seem to be more concerned about leakage from the capture process than they are from leakage from the reservoir. And that was a little surprising to me, because I thought most people would perceive leakage more associated with the reservoir, not with the capture process. But that's the answers we have. And also, and this again is back to Katie's final statement, and really supports your view that the top governance priority seems to be if CCS are able to support the climate issues. So we tended to think before we had a questionnaire that maybe people would be more concerned about the environment and the leakage potential. But actually what they are most concerned about is that this technology will support the climate issue. So then to the conclusions, I think what we can say is that understanding how risk is perceived and communicated is really necessary to properly address the societal risk in CCS. And also addressing societal risk depends on a thorough and critical stakeholder examination. And I would add, as very important, it also, in fact, need to be a collaboration between social and natural scientists to be able to pose the right questions. Because if you ask the question, how concerned are you about leakage of CO2 storage? And this is a yes/no answer. The answer will be different than if you ask, how concerned are you about CO2 leakage from a storage reservoir? If you know there are 5 barriers between the reservoir and the leakage point. Of course, the answer will be very different. So in order for the social scientists to formulate their questions in the most adequate and precise way, I think integrating technical scientists in this process with this. Then third, integrating societal risk in project design is really important to secure CCS deployment on a large scale, as we are now industrializing CCS. And finally then, we need to have societal risk included in tools and methodologies for risk assessment. As it is, the risk assessment tools include technical, financial risk, but no societal risk. And this needs to be changed, and this is what we hope to do in the Remonco project. Thank you.